Good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you and to call to order the 62nd annual meeting of the Center for Research Libraries Council of Voting Members. I'm Fred Heath. I'm Vice Provost at the University of Texas Austin for Libraries, and I'm Chair of your Board of Directors. Here you see the agenda for today's meeting. As the Board and President Riley will review with you the state and the business of your organization. Your presence and your participation today are richly appreciated. As the first step in my responsibilities today, allow me to introduce to you the members of your Board of Directors. First, Paul Carant, University Librarian and Dean of Libraries at the University of Michigan, Vice Chair of your Board of Directors and member of the Executive Committee. Ed Macias, Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at Washington University in St. Louis, past Vice Chair of your Board of Directors and member of the Executive Committee. Sarah Mahalik, Associate Provost for Libraries and University Librarian, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Treasurer of the Board of Directors, Chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, and member of the Executive Committee. Leslie Weir, University Librarian at the University of Ottawa, Secretary of the Board of Directors, Chief of the Membership Committee, and member of the Executive Committee. Richard Fife, Rosenthal Librarian at the College of Grinnell, Chair of the Collections and Services Policy Committee. Deborah Carver, Dean of Libraries, University of Oregon. Susan Gibbons, Vice Provost, and Andrew H. and Janet Dayton Neely, Dean of River Campus Libraries, University of Rochester. James Grossman, Executive Director of the American Historical Association. Charles Henry, President, Council on Library and Information Resources. Peter Lang, Provost, Duke University, Chair of the Global Resources Committee. Earl Lewis, Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, Emory University. Susan James Mullins, Dean of Libraries and Professor, Purdue University. Joyce Ogburn, University Librarian and Director of the J. Willard Marriott Library, University of Utah. And lastly, Bernie Riley, President of the Center for Research Libraries and member of the Executive Committee and ex officio member of all of our committees. Your chair's report is published in full in the CRL's 2010 annual report, and in the interest of brevity, I will point you to that for the full report. Today, I will say quickly and gratefully that I am now concluding my second and final year as chair of the Center for Research Libraries Board of Directors. The opportunity to work alongside my colleagues in service to the principles of CRL and in support of scholarly research has been truly one of the highlights of my time in librarianship. Likewise, it has been my privilege to work with President Bernie Riley and his dedicated and innovative staff as they have advanced our research goals in the midst of the most challenging economic times since our inception in 1949. The leadership of Bernie and the dedication of his staff on our behalf allow all of us to realize that in these demanding times, close collaboration is required to advance the research agenda of our universities. Our theme this year is continuity, and by that purposeful choice of words, our president has underscored the commitment of our organization to to advance two key aspects of our mutual research agenda: the continuing acquisition and maintenance of the print resources that represent the long tail of scholarly research, and the ongoing effort to secure persistent access to digital resources that represent an ever-increasing proportion of our information universe. I thank you for the opportunity to serve you on this board. And now I will ask Leslie Weir, University Librarian at the University of Ottawa, to present you the Secretary's report.
Thank you, Fred. I would like at this time to submit the minutes of our last meeting held on April 23rd, 2010 for approval by the membership. I'd like to ask if there are any comments or corrections to those minutes.
Those minutes were posted on the web at the website for this particular event.
Hearing no questions or corrections, I would like to ask for a motion for approval of those minutes, and I'd like to ask whoever makes the motion to state their name and their institutional affiliation when they make that motion. So do we have someone who'd like to move adoption of the minutes? Thank you very much. And do we have a seconder? I'd now like to ask the membership to vote approval of the minutes. You can vote now. The minutes are approved unanimously by the participating members. So I'd now like to move on to the membership report for fiscal year 2011. We had a total membership for 2011 of 254 institutions. CRL enrolled 14 new voting members since July 1st, 2010. We have Arkansas State University, Georgia Southern University, Middlebury College, Olivet Nazar University, Utah State University, Williams College, the University of Central Florida, University of Massachusetts at Boston, University of Maryland, University of Northern British Columbia, University of North Florida, University of the South, University of Texas at El Paso, whose membership will begin July 1st, 2011, and York University. We'd like to welcome the new members, and many of those institutions are participating in today's webinar. This increase in membership brought revenues for 2011 of $87,256. Of the 14 new members, 13 of the members enrolled under the new voting member incentive program. The 14th member was the University of Maryland, who was a returning member. You will notice on the table that we, in fact, during these difficult financial times that Fred was speaking of, have in fact maintained a very good representation of membership. We have increased our membership by 40 members since 2007. And of course, the economic downturn taking place in 2008 makes this quite a feat. And We would like to congratulate especially Bernie and the membership committee for their efforts in ensuring that we maintain and build our membership. For the membership report for 2012, we had a deadline of December 31st, 2010, when member institutions had to notify us of non-renewal. We had 6 non-renewal notifications, resulting in a decrease of revenue of $77,967. We retained 248 members for fiscal year 2012, and with yesterday's vote of the board of our 251st member who was approved, we have City University of New York Graduate Center who will be joining us on July 1st, 2011, making for a total of 251 members for fiscal year 2012. I'd like to move on to membership development at this point and highlight that we were extremely active over this year with 10 webinars that included more than 500 participants from 129 institutions. We also hosted 5 tours, which included 20 librarians from 4 CRL member libraries and a delegation of librarians from Thailand. We have also been involved in 4 workshops and forums at the Charleston Pre-Conference, the Global Resources Network Forum, and 2 annual meeting forums. This concludes the report of the Secretary on membership, and I'd like to ask if any of the members have any questions. Hearing no questions, I will now turn the podium over to Bernie Riley, and he will present the President's report. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Leslie. You've no doubt by now have experienced the one-way nature of this dialogue. We do encourage you, there will be opportunities for you to vote on the budget, to vote on the slate of nominees for Board of Directors. There will also be opportunities for you to talk and to provide basically talk comment to the to us in Sarah Mahalik discussion of the budget. At any time during these proceedings, though, you're welcome to chat, to use the chat function to comment or to let us know if you're having any technical difficulties in particular. My report is about what we've done in 2011 and what we plan to do in 2012. It's essentially a preface to the budget proposal that Sarah Mahalik, the treasurer, will present. Our theme this year is continuity, the theme of the annual report and the theme of this meeting, the theme of our collections forum. What we are about as research libraries is permanence of the historical and scholarly record. Ultimately, the goal of continuity is responsible stewardship, responsible continuation of the collections that we've been entrusted with and we've developed over time. We are now moving as institutions from operations built around tangible, locally managed collections of print and microform primarily, to a system of networked and licensed digital resources. There's now a great deal of pressure, as you are experiencing, to reclaim space by reducing redundant and extraneous print collections, particularly journals. There's pressure to discontinue print and electronic, to discontinue the print side of your electronic journal subscriptions to reduce costs, and therefore, and that means we're working increasingly without a net. Therefore, in addition to continuity will require a number of things in addition to what CRL has traditionally done, which is to maintain permanent collections of little used materials, of materials critical for advanced research and for advanced teaching. Today we need to rely on databases. We need to rely on repositories of including print archives, libraries of record, like the large research library holdings that we've maintained at institutions like CRL and in member institutions like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, University of California. We need to rely on solid digital libraries like the Hathi Trust and the Meta Archive. These are organizations in which we're investing and in which we're entrusting a great deal of our stewardship activities. We need to rely on primary source databases like LexisNexis, Factiva, and EBSCO, the EBO, Early English Books Online, to not only deliver, but also in some cases to maintain holdings that we don't hold in physical form. We need to rely on preservation services like Portico and clocks. We think there is, and with these, the great dependency that we now have on some of these external operations, we think CRL thinks that we need more support. We need more data for making decisions about investments and the trustworthiness of these operations. So we need support. CRL believes that the CRL libraries need support, data, and also that we need collective action. So, since 1949, CRL has been an umbrella for communities of interest for providing support, data, information sharing, and collective action among communities of interest. The 10 universities that formed CRL in 1949 were acting to support the advanced research agendas that were developing at the big research universities in 1949 after World War II. So the CRL was formed as a platform for collective action, a platform to build and manage and make available collections that were not able to be held locally by the individual member constituent institutions. The 1960s brought the area microform projects, the formation of a number of area preservation projects built around interest in particular geographical areas. The area microform projects involved some of the foremost specialists in particular area studies, in Latin American studies, African studies, Middle East studies, at a number of the major universities in the U.S. and Canada. These projects built collections. They identified materials that were at risk. They identified materials that were important for long-term, important to be made available for long-term access. And so the area microform projects were an early example of pooling expertise and resources to preserve and ensure the survival and ensure the accessibility of critical materials for area-based research. In the 1990s and early 2000s, the Global Resources Programs came to CRL. These Global Resources Programs were kind of the digital counterparts to the area microform projects. That's a little bit of oversimplification, but the Global Resources projects were, again, communities of interest who formed around interests in particular parts of the world: Latin America, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East. These programs came to CRL from the Association of Research Libraries a few years ago, and they've been building and thriving since. To the original Global Resources programs, we've also added 2 new programs. One on news, that's a community of interest around the preservation of news, and another which is around French language studies, the CIFNAL project. In 2001, CRL created the JSTOR print archive. The JSTOR print archive was formed to maintain a complete and permanent archive of print versions of the JSTOR journals. That archive has grown over time and is keeping pretty good pace with the growth of the JSTOR corpus. This is a feature of CRL that's been particularly useful, particularly to some of the smaller and mid-sized libraries as well. It's enabled them to divest of local copies of JSTOR journals. In 2002, we did a study of repositories of shared print repositories in North America. This was commissioned by the Council on Library and Information Resources and looked at the shared repositories developed by the 5 colleges of Massachusetts, the 5 colleges of Ohio, and a number of other regional consortia. Looked at which of these shared print repositories were working well, what their features were, why they were working well, if they were working well, what their costs were, and that kind of thing. That was really the beginning of CRL, starting to provide support for decisions being made locally, and decisions particularly about which kinds of journals to retain, which not to retain, how to do shared collections, essentially. In 2003, we organized and hosted the Preserving America's Print Resources conference, which brought together about 120 research libraries and consortia to address the problem, to examine the potential for the development of print archives, the greater development of shared print collections, and the greater reduction of print collection, of unnecessary redundancy in print collections. The conference developed a set of action items, and one of those, the particular action item was that these archives need to be built around areas of strength, that these archives need to be built in places or established in places where there is already reasons for particular kinds of print materials to be maintained and even developed, and that had the expertise, possessed the expertise to really provide trustworthy archiving services. So what the Pay for Conference told us was that where print archiving is going to work, it needs to be built on strength, on existing strength. So continuity being the theme of our meeting. Back to that, the continuity for us means the continuation of collections, continuation of CRL's developing of a shared collection. This year, through the Purchase Proposal Program, CRL acquired about $100,000 and some worth of Microform collections. These are Microform collections that were nominated and voted on by the collections people from many of your institutions. The CRL also assembled a group of libraries to pool additional funds to acquire several additional Microform collections, and those collections have been acquired and will be available to all CRL members. But however, it's a small, relatively limited set of CRL members that are contributing to the cost of those. This has worked fairly well. This is a long-standing program at CRL. This is how we've been building collections. So again, communities of interest. These are groups that coalesce around shared needs and shared interests, and these are the groups that guide CRL collecting. We are concentrating in our development and of collections in some areas of strength, the area of news, and both foreign and U.S. news. That has been a particularly strong area of CRL collecting for many, many years, actually from the beginning. One of the first acquisitions, one of the first decisions that the people that formed CRL made was to start acquiring foreign newspapers, start subscribing to newspapers from Europe. We also heavily invested in foreign government documents and in archives of government documents, primarily on microfilm, and on collecting dissertations from universities outside of the United States and Canada. These are areas that we've continued to develop and will continue to develop. But what we're also doing is something that's is introducing, what we've done in 2011 is introduce some new services, some new activities that have been enabled, that we're able to introduce thanks to the support from the National Science Foundation, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. That is, we're doing really three things to help support collection development and management locally. analysis, information exchange, and support for digital access. These are the three services that, or the three new areas of CRL activity that you'll see reflected in the upcoming budget, the budget that we'll discuss a little bit later on. Many of you have already been experiencing these services because we've been up and running for the better part of the year, and a number of specialists at your institutions have been participating in these activities and contributing to the activities as well. Specifically, analysis. We really don't think that there is enough information available to support the kinds of decisions that you're being asked to make at CRL institutions. You're being asked to make decisions on investment in large digital repositories. In 2009, CRL performed an audit. It took about 9 months of the Portico digital repository. This audit was designed to determine to what extent, to what degree Portico was serviceable as a trustworthy digital repository, to what extent Portico did what it presented that it did what it would claim to do, to what extent that to where there were limitations, where there's room for improvement, where there's room for enhancement. Our analysis of the Portico audit was informed by our certification advisory panel. Certain members of the certification advisory panel are drawn from all sectors of CRL membership. They include library directors, as well as preservation people, as well as collection development people, as well as IT people. Martha Brogan has chaired the certification advisory panel for the last, since its inception at the beginning of the Portico audit. Winston Atkins from Duke University, Oya Rieger from Cornell University, Bart Harlow from St. Lawrence University, Perry Willett from California Digital Library, Bill Parad from Northwestern University, and Brian Schottlander from the University of California in San Diego have all served on the certification advisory panel. The panel has ensured that our analysis, our evaluation of Portico, and our evaluation of HathiTrust has been has represented the interests of CRL libraries, of CRL membership. We are looking at these repositories from the standpoint of the CRL libraries' interests. Why are say the kinds of questions we're asking are how well and how broadly does a particular repository cover the collections of concern, collections of interest to CRL libraries? To what extent is the pricing model and the business model acceptable and sustainable? There'll be more about the HathiTrust audit this afternoon in our collections forum. John Price Wilkins will be talking with Winston Atkins, one of the members of our certification advisory panel, about the HathiTrust, and a number of people that have registered for that session have submitted questions in advance. So it should be a good question. It should be a good opportunity for people to learn more about the results of the HathiTrust audit. We think that both Portico and HathiTrust are going to be very important to CRL libraries in moving from being heavily encumbered by redundant print to being more able to invest in the digital environment, to invest in digital resources. So this is important. We've also just completed for the Library of Commerce an analysis of electronic news. This news has traditionally been an area of concentration for CRL, collections concentration. We have the largest circulating collection of news papers in North America, I think probably in the world, but And that, as I said, is something that's been collected. Newspapers have been collected by CRL since the very beginning. So you invested a lot in that. We've also invested a fair amount. The CRL community has invested a lot in collecting these themselves as well. Larger institutions like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, University of California have all developed, Cornell has all developed substantial collections of news. So the preservation of news is of very direct and immediate interest to us. There was a conference in 2009 sponsored by the INDIP program at the Library of Congress, the National Digital Information Infrastructure and Preservation Program of Library of Congress. And that conference assembled some librarians and a lot of people from the news industry and from the aggregating industry and from the technology world to look at the problem of electronic news. As you know, the Library of Congress has built enormous collections of American newspapers and foreign newspapers over the year, but largely American newspapers through copyright deposit. What newspapers are depositing now for copyright is a microfilm of their newspapers. What was clear at this conference is that a lot of that microfilm is obviously not going to do it for us in the future. It's not a comprehensive, not anywhere near a comprehensive record of news reporting. With the web having become an extremely important platform for reporting, delivery of news reporting, so that there is we are facing a widening gap, which widens every year in our coverage of news, in our ability, in our preservation of the record of world news. So we proposed to do, or we undertook at the on behalf of the Library of Congress, a study of the electronic news production. It became clear at the conference that we really didn't know enough about what we were talking about, if we were talking about what the products of news reporting are today, that we really needed to understand a lot more about how news is sourced in the electronic world, how news is processed and produced and output, and how the news is distributed, because obviously these are all different than the way these things happened in the print world. So we decided to look at the technology and the systems that are involved in producing news, the large editorial systems that are used by large news organizations like Knight and Gannett, the Tribune Company, the New York Times, the Associated Press, just to see how the content was being captured, how the content was being sourced, how the content was being managed and annotated and enriched within these systems, and how it was then being ported to the web. We also looked at the economics of news production as well, which are also have an impact on preservation, in particular the copyright and the rights to news. And we looked at the way the rights to the news output that you see on the web are actually transferred and exchanged. These rights are in many cases much more complex than the rights that were traded and exchanged in the paper realm, in the print realm. So what we found as a result, and this study will be published to the web in a couple of weeks. The Library of Congress will publish it, and CRL will publish it on our web. We found is that to be able to come up with a rational, manageable, doable, viable strategy for preserving electronic news, we need to do, there are three things we need. Number one, we need to know a lot more about how electronic news is used by scholars. And these include both historians, but also people in the very large policy research community. These are large consumers of news. These are large consumers of old news. And we really, their uses of news content, particularly news text, are very, very different than the kinds of uses people made of news when it was just paper. We also realized that we're dealing with some very large players in the field now, where in the past we were dealing with publishers that were mainly operating at a local level. With the consolidation of the news industry, we're dealing with some very big parent companies. The parent companies control in most cases, not only the rights to the news that's produced, but they control the technology used to produce it. They're even setting the standards for news production, for production of news, digital content. We also found that web archiving, as we know it, is really not going to work. It's just not working for news. That the cycle of change in electronic news content is just so fast that the harvesters are not capturing it. Also, there's so much news content that appears on the site of a organization like the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune that is never actually on the site of the Chicago Tribune or the New York Times. There's a fair amount of content, particularly animations, data, and video content in the form of advertising that is piped directly to the user. That's never actually even in the possession of the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune. So that complicates the rights issues, it complicates web archiving. A lot of that just can't be captured. We had an electronic analysis of the frequency of change of content on the Chicago Tribune website and found that a fair amount of content changes about every 30 seconds. That very little content lasts more than about 6 hours, and we'll publish the detailed results of that on our new study. But this is the kind of analysis that we are doing more, that is designed to inform libraries developing strategies, particularly larger libraries developing strategies for continued preservation and collection development. In 2012, we'll do some more things. There'll be we have put on the web we expanded CRL's web to include something called the Global Resources Forum. And the Global Resources Forum is a set of activities that designed to support collection development at CRL member libraries and the consortia that they work with locally, the regional and state level groups. The CRL, the Global Resources Forum, has it includes reviews which are critical analysis, independent analysis of large major databases, particularly those in the areas of CRL traditional concentration, news, public opinion information, archives, primary source archives, those kinds of things. We're focusing on providing more information, more critical analysis of those databases, which you are being asked to buy. We have had a long-standing partnership with the Charleston Advisor. I think long-standing these days means about 3 or 4 years. And the Charleston Advisor has, for about the last 10 years, provided reviews of these kinds of databases and electronic resources. What we're providing, what's new to this with CRL, is that we're getting these reviews out before the actual electronic resource is published in many cases. That these are reviews that are being done when you're being approached by the vendor sales representatives. We had there was the announcement last spring by ProQuest that they were producing a digital version of the Times of India newspaper, and we had the analysis of that, our analysis of that, up on the web within a couple of weeks, and this is well before the actual newspaper or the digital collection was produced. But we felt we had to act fast because these databases are being sold or marketed before they're actually completed. So we couldn't wait for the published review in the Charleston Advisor, so we started putting some of these up on the web. We are also, Liz Ann Payne, our consultant on print archiving, has been working with us to design the framework or the specifications for a database which we are naming after the 2003 conference, the paper database. We are working with, Liz Ann and CRL are working with the California Digital Library to develop a database that will help inform planning and decision making about print archiving. database is supposed to provide support for print archives and collection management decisions being made. We have been convening the print archiving, the representatives of the major regional print archiving efforts that are happening over the last year. And what we've learned is that what is not being done locally, what they need is not for CRL to take a piece of the pie or a piece of the collections and archive them here at CRL, but what they need is information about what each other are doing, about the nature of the archiving that's being done. The paper database, the Phase 1 paper database, is to provide a central source of data for decisions on what to retain, what to withdraw, what to archive at the local level, at the in your individual libraries and at your regional print archiving efforts, what services ought to be layered on those collections if they are to be retained and archived, whether to reformat something, whether you ought to digitize something that's there and hasn't been digitized yet, whether to conserve, to repair, or replace a collection that you may be holding as a collection of record. It's also designed to help guide decisions on whether to buy or subscribe to a major database to replace print holdings in particular cases, or to replace Microform holdings in a particular case, whether to trust or invest in a particular digital repository like HathiTrust or Portico, Clocks, MetaArchive, and how much how much value is produced by these repositories, how much content is actually there, how well that content matches with your local holdings, those kinds of things. So the database, specifically the Phase 1 database, which is being developed this year, or during the 2011-2012 timeframe, the database will ingest, manage, and process information about print holdings of serials held locally by institutions committed to archiving them. Those institutions include the West members, CRL itself, and the members of other consortia that are doing archiving at the regional level, like ASERL and the CIC. The database will record conditions of archiving. We'll give you a bit more background about what kinds of climate and security conditions are in place for a particular archive body of material, how recently it's been shelf-read, whether there's page-level validation, which usually doesn't happen, but what level of validation of those archives there is. So the kind of information that helps you make decisions about what to do with your local holdings. It will, in the longer term, we hope that this database will also record the presence of digital versions of print serial holdings in certified repositories, certified digital repositories, and in selected major databases that we are investing large amounts of money in, so that we have a way to match print holdings to the actual contents of database, which is sometimes different than the advertised contents of the databases. So, in 2012, we've also engaged Ithaca S&R to work with us to assess the longer-term needs, or to get a better picture of the needs of collection management people and collection decision makers. The Ithaca has undertaken already a survey of selected CRL libraries and representatives to help us understand what features this paper database ought to include, what kinds of decision-making tools collection management people need. This is building on the what to withdraw tool that Ithaca S&R developed last year. What we are learning from the Ithaca study is what kinds of decision-making, what the current decision-making practices are, how people in the collections in positions of responsibility at the major CRL libraries are making decisions about retaining, withdrawing, upgrading, preserving, repairing, and replacing collections, what kinds of data that they're working with. We need to understand what kind of information they already have and what kind of information is being created in the process of this kind of activity, of the regional print archiving activity. We, for a long time, CRL has traditionally worked, been, as I said earlier, an umbrella for action by communities of interest. These communities of interest have formed around particular areas of study. And this has been, primarily devoted to the areas of the world, to regions of the world. We think that in moving our libraries into a more digital realm, that probably the best strategy for us is to work with groups that have established histories of working together. One of the findings of our print repository study in 2002 was that the archiving succeeds where it's based on a history of collaboration, where it's based on a long-standing practical collaboration between institutions. So we've identified two organizations that have long histories of collaborative preservation, and even cooperative collection development, cooperative resource development. And we were funded this year by the Institute of Museum and Library Services through the National Leadership Grant programs to work in two areas, law and agriculture. We are working with the Law Libraries Microform Consortium, which has initiated some archiving of print materials that are being increasingly and more rapidly discarded by law libraries. These are primary publications. These are published statutes, laws, cases, those kinds of things that are published by state, local, national, and national governments. And they're the primary documentation, but the law schools have less use for them as LexisNexis and Westlaw databases become more important. We are LLMC, Law Library Microform Consortium, since the 1970s has been microfilming these materials, and about 7 or 8 years ago started digitizing aggressively these kinds of materials. In tandem with the digitization, they're also archiving print from these. So our project with LLMC is to essentially inventory the archiving practices, look at what's been archived, under what conditions, what kind of metadata and holdings information is disclosed about those archives, what kinds of commitments are on them, and what kinds of services are layered over them, what's delivered electronically. And then to convene representatives of the law library community to help us decide, is that enough? Is this way of going about it good enough? Is it going to move us forward? Is it going to enable libraries to reduce redundant holdings? Is it going to enable libraries to manage the remaining print corpus properly? Is it going to enable us to move more aggressively or aggressively and rapidly enough into digital delivery of legal materials? We are also working with the U.S. Agricultural Information Network, particularly with Joy Paulson at Cornell University. The U.S. Agricultural Information Network is an organization, is a federation of primarily U.S. land-grant institutions, mostly state universities that have strong agricultural collections and strong historic interests in agriculture. We're doing something similar. This project is similar to the agriculture project. We're looking at the materials that the U.S. Agricultural Information Network identified as the core bibliography of the history of American agriculture, looking at the microfilming that was done of those, the archiving that was done of those, and the digitization that was done of those, bringing the agricultural community together, agricultural libraries community together next year to look at what's there, what's been done, and decide how can we build on this. What is this good enough? Are these conditions of archiving good enough? Are there enough copies? That kind of thing, to answer those questions. So these two projects are designed to answer, to develop consensus among the community on the archiving standards and needs and the access needs, essentially, for historic legacy materials in the fields of law and agriculture. In 2011, information exchange has been a big part of our activities. Again, the Global Resources Forum. We've had we know that everybody that most people at CRL libraries are doing at least 2 jobs these days, and that applies to the area specialists and the subject specialists as well. So our solution to that, or what we're doing to help on that, is to pool the expertise that resides in the CRL institutions, to pool the knowledge of particular areas of study, of particular collections areas of collection development in these particular areas, whether they be regions of the world or particular formats like news or topics like immigration and medieval history. Pooling knowledge and expertise in the Global Resources Forum. We have convened a number of print archives forums at ALA over the last year and a half. Lizanne Payne has been our person who's really organized those, and these have brought a number of consortia, representatives of consortia and individual libraries together to pool information, to pool practices, to pool expertise, and to pool ideas about print archiving, particularly for serials. We also worked with the Greater Western Libraries Alliance to co-sponsor a roundtable on water this year. Water sounds like an impossibly vague and broad topic, but it was the Water Forum which we held in Denver in November, was brought together about 50 people from CRL and Gwilla libraries that were in fields of engineering, public policy, economics, political science, and agriculture, to look at the kinds of resources, the collections, as well as the databases that are available to people in the field of water studies, which is becoming increasingly important, and to talk about whether this is enough for the kinds of research that's being done, as well as the librarians at this meeting at the forum or at the roundtable. We had the representatives of some of the water districts and some of the legislatures. There was actually somebody from the Supreme Court of the state of Denver spoke at the forum as well as people managing the databases, people from the U.S. Geological Survey, and people from some of the water libraries that are managing large databases of water information. This was particularly interesting because it did bring together, as our roundtables do, the librarians with the people doing research, with the people producing the content, producing the data. There are a number of important outcomes that came from it. Just one realization that came from it is that there's a broad constituency for water information, and at the same time as that constituency is growing, the accessibility of water-related information is declining. There are a number of digital libraries that have mounted, digitized, and put on the web legacy collections, historical collections related to water. Those are having a very hard time being funded. There's also a number of these large digital libraries of current water information that are having difficulty getting funding as well. So the roundtable was a place for people to share information about issues and about problems, and to hatch some solutions. We also convened in June a forum on fair dealing. This forum brought together the heads of the CRL area Microform projects and the Global Resources projects, as well as a number of other organizations to discuss the obstacles to digitization and accessibility of materials from developing parts of the world. Now that the microfilm era is waning, the digitization of collections is running into some major obstacles in making collections available, making materials from various parts of the world on the web. I think the Microform by nature was a more acceptable form of dissemination to a number of the home archives, the actual archives in these developing worlds, than these developing nations, than digitization. Digitization raises a number of new problems for it. They also face the question of sustainability of digital materials, digital collections of materials from developing parts of the world, and discussed incentives for participation in digitization, for cooperation in digitization. The webinars that CRL held were opportunities for people from CRL libraries, and largely their collections and reference people from CRL libraries, to participate in online presentations and discussions in particular areas. We did a webinar on the water forum that was based on the roundtable in Denver. We did a webinar on medieval studies, which was very heavily attended, one on African studies, and one on law and government. And these, again, were designed to support people that are now doing additional jobs, or now doing 2 and 3 jobs, now covering a large amount of territory at their local institutions. We also hosted, with the University of Utah, the Charleston Pre-Conference at this year, which was organized by Rick Anderson and Joyce Ogburn at the University of Utah, with help from Dan Hazen. This was the radically different future of collection development, which was actually a quite lively discussion of where collection development is going, which was very, very well attended at Charleston. We figured that since a lot of CRL libraries send people to the Charleston Conference, we take advantage of that. So in 2012, more information exchange. The Global Resources Forum is growing. There will be increasing number of reviews, profiles, and topic guides and data on that part of the CRL web. There will be more about the Global Resources Forum at this afternoon's Collections Forum webcast. I won't say anything more about that. Print Archives Forum, we will have we'll again convene interested libraries and consortia in conjunction with ALA's meeting on the morning of June 24th. You'll see more information about that as the date gets closer. We have webinars coming up this year that are about print archiving. We also have a news webinar scheduled for July 13th, so there'll be more about that in this afternoon's Collections Forum as well. And again, we will have another pre-conference in Charleston, so more to come on that. The next year's CRL Council meeting, this meeting will be an in-person meeting. We think that everybody needs to come to Chicago periodically as a kind of reality check on what life is really like. So we will bring people together next year in person and have an extended program. That will be in April, and we will set the date fairly soon. We don't want to conflict with the ARL meeting, which is also in Chicago next April. So in 2011, our support for digital access. We had expanded the World's Newspaper Archive. This is the program that is selecting newspapers from different parts of the world for digitization. It's done in concert with Redex. This effort is guided by an advisory group that includes Adon Benavides from the University of Texas, Frank Conaway from the University of Chicago, Chuck Ekman, who's now at the University of British Columbia, University Simon Fraser University, Sharon Farb at the University of California, Los Angeles, Dan Hazen from Harvard, John Ingram from the University of Florida, or as an outgoing member, has served on this World Newspaper Archive advisory group, and Mary Stewart from the University of Illinois. So again, a group effort. The collection has expanded this year to include Sub-Saharan African, and South Asian newspapers. That will continue to expand next year. This year we also made available to CRL libraries on a trial basis the law libraries, the LLMC digital database, which is a database of about 17 million pages of primary source primary source materials. In that database, those include both Canadian and U.S. legislative journals, and this year we added materials, early Haitian legal materials that were digitized after the earthquake in Haiti, and a large amount of early laws from the colonial period in Africa, a number of African nations that were under British common law. Those have been digitized and added to that database as well. So CRL is working with the Law Library Microform Consortium to expand the database. We're digitizing a fair number of CRL collections, but also collections out there in law libraries that would otherwise be not accessible to CRL libraries. The participants, the Global Resources Law Project is guided, again, by a steering committee, and that steering committee includes Jackie Drury from Queen's University, Judith Gaskell, who's librarian of the Court of the Supreme Court of the United States, and Matthew Mann, who's Dalhousie University Law Library, Bobby Snow from the University of Michigan Law Library, Judith Wright from the University of Chicago D'Angelo Law Library, and Annalise Sklar from the University of California, San Diego Humanities Library. Annalise is the social science and political science specialist at UC San Diego. These are the people that are guiding our decisions about digitization of the collections. So the TRAIL project is a project that is rapidly digitizing U.S. government technical reports. This is a program that, again, is a community of interest organized or operating under the CRL umbrella that is been identifying important and endangered materials in various engineering and government documents repositories and digitizing those and putting them on the web. That effort has been ably managed and catalyzed by Malaika Oxnam from the University of Arizona. News databases, large public opinion information databases, and databases that are of government, primarily foreign government documents and other primary source materials. We have been able to negotiate favorable terms for acquisition of those databases on behalf of the CRL members. That activity has been integrated into our purchase proposal program this year. For 2012, we are going to be doing more with law and government information. The LLMC database will continue to grow, and that will be guided by the Global Resources Law Steering Committee. We're also examining CRL's holdings broadly in science, technology, and engineering. These collections are historic and current materials as well. CRL has strong historical collections of journals in the fields of science, technology, and engineering. And we also have fairly sizable current holdings, current subscriptions to these materials. We're looking at how can we provide CRL access to a broader collection, to a more complete and comprehensive and reliable collection of these. So we are looking at holdings of some of the other libraries of record of science, technology, and engineering materials, and particularly Linda Hall Library in Kansas City. We found that Linda Hall Library has, in its current serials, has a pretty close overlap with CRL holdings, and that their historical holdings do a great job of augmenting and complementing filling in CRL's historic holdings. So we're exploring the possibility of bringing these holdings together and providing more global access to these holdings to CRL libraries. we'll be talking more about that in the coming year. In the collections and services, CRL's collections and services, collections services and policy committee has been studying the holdings and the kinds of, and talking about the kinds of assurances that we would like to have, the kinds of benefits that we would like to get out of a cooperative venture with Linda Hall Library. Linda Hall is just one of a number of independent research libraries that our communities have traditionally relied on, the scholars in our communities have traditionally relied on, that are now very threatened by the current economy and by the disappearance of a lot of local support. A lot of these organizations, like very important organizations like the American Antiquarian Society, Linda Hall Library, Massachusetts Historical Society, and others, are having to reduce the services to researchers because of the erosion of support or the decline in support. We think that they're important, that we have a stake in these institutions, and we'll be looking at broader cooperation with them in the coming year. In the area of news, we'll be doing more in the way of negotiating access to digital collections of news. We're proceeding carefully and slowly. In some cases, our support will be merely in the form of getting people together to talk about the news databases, to share their evaluations of the news databases. In other cases, it will involve actually negotiating terms whereby the CRL libraries can have access to databases. It will certainly be designed to force more disclosure, more transparency about the contents of the databases and the features of these databases and long-term sustainability. So my report is really the preface to the talking to Sarah Mahalik, our treasurer's presentation about the budget. You will see in the budget, as Sarah presents it, how we are continuing to invest heavily in collections, in partnerships, and expanding services to CRL libraries while maintaining costs and supporting collection development and investment. What's been absolutely critical to that has been the participation of your libraries, not only your support, but the participation of your staff, your collection specialists, your area specialists, your collection management people in our discussions and deliberations. We are grateful for that, and we will continue to try to return more benefits to your institutions through this great pool of expertise. Sarah Mahalik, CRL's treasurer, will now present the proposed budget for CRL for 2012. That budget was emailed to all the library directors on April 15th. Sarah, at a particular moment, will open the microphone or open the phones for discussion and comment about the budget. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bernie. My presentation has three parts: a summary of the FY 2010 operating fund results, an update on the current fiscal year outlook, and the proposed 2012 budget. The 2010 financial statements appear in the annual report, which is posted on the meeting website. And detailed spreadsheets and an explanatory overview of the fiscal 2012 budget were sent to all members on April 15th, as Bernie said. So that you may want to have that the 2012 proposal nearby as we go through this presentation. I wish that I could promise you a lively and colorful treasurer's report, but it might not be so lively. We've made the choice between giving you the budget numbers and giving you graphics, and I have chosen the numbers. I think it's very important to look at the trends that we show in these slides and to look at the numbers themselves. For FY 2010 operating fund results, appear in the far left column of pages 2 and 3 on the budget proposal that I just told you about. The all funds results, which include grant and special project fund results, are reported in detail in the financial statements published in the CRL annual report. CRL ended fiscal year 2010 with a healthy increase of $240,000 in its operating assets. These increases were due to several factors: rigorous cost containment, major grants received in 2010 from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and the MacArthur Foundation, utility savings achieved through energy conservation measures, higher than expected income from services and Microform sales, and lower than expected OCLC fees. As for 2011, the current fiscal year, we project a smaller than budgeted deficit. The projected deficit was necessary to maintain constant levels of spending on collections without increasing the cost share rate. The cost share rate is member dues, as you know. We expect managing the projected deficit down from $210,000 to $57,000 is a tremendous accomplishment and a great tribute to Bernie and his staff. We expect to partially close the gap by reducing personnel expenditures through attrition and reimbursement of indirect costs with new grant funds. There is also a budget reserve that enables us to absorb some deficit. The projected FY 2012 operating fund revenue is the next slide. The budget proposed is extremely lean, but would enable CRL to maintain current collecting and service levels and critical infrastructure, as well as to expand services and resources in a few strategic areas. The projected revenue reflects the impact of the severe economic downturn affecting CRL and its community, and our desire to minimize impact on current member cost shares. The budget assumes continuation of the current 0.52% cost share, which was reduced in 2009 and has remained stable since then. Investment income is expected to be higher than the current year because of the limited recovery in the economy and the financial markets and increased flexibility in investment of CRL's reserve funds, which will be supported by the new CRL investment policy. Last year, the Board of Directors approved a move of some funds into a potential investment fund, and the new investment policy will be discussed later in the year, but should help to improve our overall income position. This slide shows you dramatically that most of CRL's operating fund revenue comes from member cost shares. That's 93.7%. This does not account for grant funds and other special project funds, which are classed as restricted funds but partially support CRL programs. 5.5% is generated by services, including digital preservation analyses and Microform sales, as you heard Bernie discuss. Less than 1% is earned from investment of reserve funds, but we do indeed plan to change that. This slide reports to you the 2010-2012 membership cost share and includes the revenues brought by new members. The projected membership cost share revenue for 2012 will be up only slightly over the current year. As you heard from Leslie, 6 members will discontinue as of July 1st, removing $77,000 from CRL support. The lost revenue will be offset by the addition of new members, which amounts to $11,600, rising cost shares of incentive members, $98,000. The incentive membership program, if you remember, is the first year paying 1/3 of the institution's cost share, second year 2/3, and then moving to the entire cost share in the third year. Rising revenue due to increase in some members' library materials expenditures is $151,000. Grant revenue over the 2010-2012 period, not reflected in the operating funds, is grant revenue, which supports CRL special projects and the initial cost of some new CRL services. In the past 3 years, CRL has obtained substantial grant funds from the Andrew Mellon Foundation and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the National Science Foundation, U.S. Department of Education, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. This is another area in which we should heartily congratulate Bernie and his staff. These grant sums make a big difference in programs and services for CRL. This year, IMLS awarded CRL $925,000 for 2 National Leadership Program grants, each of which will run for 2 years. $532,000 of the IMLS funds and approximately $930,000 in Mellon Foundation funds will be devoted to CRL 2012 activities. The proposed 2012 operating fund expenditures, these can be found in much more detail on the budget proposal that was sent to you on April 15th, and it's on pages 1 and 2. The proposed level of expenditures reflect 2 things: our determination to increase the return on CRL member investment by continuing to grow CRL collections and services, and our decision to make necessary capital improvements and repairs to the CRL collections facility in the coming year. Um, 2012 operating expenses. The largest portion of CRL's operating expenses, 50%, as you can see, are personnel. This is relatively consistent from year to year, and the total cost this year is increased by rising costs of health insurance and additions to the IT staff. The proposed personnel total includes a 2% merit pool for 2012. The CRL board recommended that in accordance with industry norms, up to 2%, that is about $45,000, will be made available for merit and market adjustments. Again, the CRL staff is outstanding, and many of the accomplishments that you see in the reports we've been giving you are from that staff, and it is appropriate to allocate some merit funding, though small. Library materials or collections will claim 18% as CRL proposes to maintain its spending at slightly above the 2011 level. Other business expense, which includes shipping, insurance, telecommunications, etc., will be 9%. Library support, OCLC costs, Microform production, copying, and storage is estimated at 6%. Plant, which includes the building and facility costs, will be 17%, more than half of which is depreciation. That's $513,000. This is separate from investment in capital improvements in the fiscal plant, which is budgeted for 2012 as approximately $380,000, and you can find the detail of that information on the budget, page 13. Change in net assets in the operating funds. The proposed budget strategy results in a negative change of 2.5% in net assets for operating funds. That's $145,000. To be conservative, we have projected only additional grant funds that projected as revenue, only additional grant funds that we have been officially notified of awards to be paid in 2012. The projected operating funds deficit of $145,000 is necessary to maintain member services and benefits without increasing the cost share. This is important to compensate for the reductions in services and resources available to researchers because of local cutbacks. Again, budget reserves can absorb the deficit if it has not been eliminated by ongoing management during the budget year, which it is very likely will happen in that way. The negative change will still enable CRL to cover 70% of its depreciation and meet its commitments to its lenders. This slide has quite a few numbers on it, but we wanted to show you some detail about the investment in digitization over the last 3 years. This has been a major strategic direction for CRL, and the numbers are a reflection of that. Investment in digitization and digital access reflects the continuing emphasis on systematic and patron-driven scanning of CRL collections. 2010 costs reflect initial investments in equipment and infrastructure. That's why it's considerably higher than 11 and 12. The growth in pages scanned in 2011 reflects production spikes in the digitization of news and historic journals through CRL partnerships with Redex and ProQuest. This is just a brief summary to indicate to you that the overall strategy in preparing the budget is to support collection growth, digitization and services, and making some improvements this year in the facilities with no cost share increase. Now, this slide we put here again because you may want to use this to vote from. It summarizes the 2012 budget proposal, and again, just to tell you that the backup information for this is on pages 1 and 2 of the proposal that was sent to you. Our next agenda is to vote on the 2012 budget, which, according to CRL bylaws, must be approved by the Members' Council. That's you. Also, if there were a proposal to increase the member cost share, members would need to approve that as well. However, as we've said, the cost share remains stable. This is a time to pause and take any questions that you might have.
And that is star 1 if you would like to ask a question on the phone.
No?
No questions on the phone.
Okay. We would appreciate a motion to approve the budget, and as you make the motion, would you please state your name and institution?
Fred Heath, University of Texas, so move the approval of the budget.
Second? So now begins our vote, and we'll wait till it's completed. The vote is complete, and the budget has passed. Thank you very much. This concludes the Treasurer's report, and Fred, back to you for new business.
Thank you, Sarah. All of us on the board will unanimously agree, I think, that the responsibilities one inherits as treasurer is the most demanding set of responsibilities of any board member. And Sarah, you've ably discharged your responsibilities this year, and we thank you for your attentiveness and your service to all of us. Annually, CRL convenes its nominating committee drawn from the membership to review your nominations for board service and to prepare for you a recommended slate of new members. On the nominating committee this year, in addition to Bernie and to myself, we were able to be joined by Ken Frazier from Wisconsin, Earl Lewis from Emory, Barbara Dewey from Penn State, and Bart Harlow from St. Louis University. So the nominating committee, as composed, and I present to you the following slate of candidates for 3-year terms on the Board of Directors beginning April 21, 2011. Janice Welborn, Dean of University Libraries at Marquette University. Scott Waugh, Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost, UCLA. And Sarah Mahalik, who will return for a second term on the Board of Directors. As chair of the nominating committee, I now move that the Council of Voting Members approve these outstanding candidates by electing the slate of nominees to your board and ask that you submit your votes now. Congratulations to Janice, Scott, and Sarah. And I wish to remind all of you that your board will again in the coming year solicit from you nominations for service on the board and encourage you to continue to put the names forward of those willing to serve. Yesterday, the board elected its officers for the coming year. Sarah Mahalik, the Associate Provost for Libraries and University Librarian at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, will serve you in the coming year as your chair. Paul Caron will serve as the vice chair, and Leslie Weir will serve as secretary. Joining us as treasurer is Deborah Carver, Dean of Libraries at the University of Oregon. And we welcome them all to their new roles on the board. As well, I wish to salute our colleague Peter Lang for his outstanding service on the board, who will be departing from service at this time, as will I. And I know I speak for Peter when I tell you how much we've enjoyed the privilege of serving CRL during our times on the board. And now, as my departing act, I wish to recognize Richard Fife, who will share with you the news of CRL's Primary Source Awards at this time. Richard.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you for your service. In the end, CRL exists to support and sustain advanced learning, teaching, and scholarship in member institutions. The Primary Source Awards were created to recognize research and teaching faculty, librarians, students, and other researchers in the CRL community for their innovative use of primary source materials in teaching, research, and providing access. The awards provide a platform for staff at CRL libraries to share and celebrate creative, innovative uses of creative and innovative strategies for the use of primary materials and for providing access to those materials. Nominations are accepted in these 3 categories: teaching, research, and access, beginning in September, and concluding on the January 31st deadline every year. The online nomination form is located on the CRL website. Eligibility is for teaching and research faculty, librarians, and other researchers and users at CRL institutions. It's nice if the primary sources involved are CRL resources, but it is not required. It's not necessary. The review, ranking, and selection process is carried out by CRL's Collections and Services Policy Committee. And I want to thank them for their service. They include Winston Atkins at Duke University, Sharon Farb at UCLA, Dan Hazen at Harvard, Scott McKenzie at Simon Fraser, Brian Skibb at the University of Michigan, Gene Richardson at Arizona State University, and Michael Stoller at New York University. As I said, I want to thank them for their work on this project and for many other activities in which they're supporting CRL. The awardees are recognized at the CRL annual meeting, as we're doing right now. Their projects will be described in the spring issue of Focus on Global Resources newsletter. And the awardees will receive a gift certificate for Powell's books, and those who nominate them receive an iPod Touch. So let's turn to this year's awardees. First, in the teaching category, the awardee this year is Lori Zitrain Eisenberg, a professor of history at Carnegie Mellon University. Professor Eisenberg received the Primary Source Award for teaching for her course Historical Evidence and Interpretation, an undergraduate course that focuses on the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. Working with CRL's member liaison, Professor Eisenberg designed the course around CRL Middle Eastern newspaper collections, radio broadcast transcripts, and other primary source materials from the period. The course is designed to provide undergraduates with the tools that historians use to document and analyze important historical events. It features a series of benchmarks to define progress from the initial stage of searching for a topic through completion of a properly documented and formatted scholarly research paper. The course ensures that students learn to read critically, seek corroborating evidence, draw their own conclusions, and present the information in a persuasive manner. Many of the students in the courses have presented their papers at the annual conference of the Western Pennsylvania Regional Phi Alpha Theta chapter and frequently win prizes. In the research category, this year's awardee is Laura Braden, a PhD candidate in the Department of Sociology at Emory University, and she was nominated by Robert O'Reilly, the coordinator of numeric data services at Emory. Ms. Braden's research considers the process of consecrating the value of an artist based on attributes such as gender and association with legitimizing organizations. The project focused on the attributes of the 308 artists who exhibited at the 1913 Armory Show in New York, and which of those artists among them have been featured in art history textbooks. Braden used Armory Show exhibition catalogs from other legitimizing organizations such as the Museum of Modern Art, and other primary source materials to create an attribute database for statistical analysis. Her research findings were published in the journal Poetics, volume 37, October through December 2009, if you'd like to look that up, and identifies the attributes that increase the likelihood of inclusion in art history textbooks, especially when legitimizing organizations function in a gatekeeper role that grants exposure to certain types of artists while excluding others. Finally, in the access category, this year's awardee is Kelly Wolf-Bockley, who is the coordinator of the Center for Primary Research and Training at the University of California at Los Angeles. And she was nominated by Jeannie Garrard, the head of the Manuscripts Division at UCLA. The Center for Primary Research and Training is a program at UCLA that pairs graduate students with unprocessed collections in their areas of interest as a way of extending learning opportunities to the students and increasing the capacity of the manuscripts library to process and provide access to more collections. Ms. Bockley received the Primary Source Award for Access for innovative program and research enhancements that she has incorporated at the Center for Primary Research and Training in the last couple of years. Some of those enhancements include increasing the number of students enrolled in the program from 28 to 36 per year, expanding the scope and length of the primary source research projects that the students engage in, expanding the number of academic departments that participate, and establishing end-of-year presentation opportunities for those students. On behalf of the board, I want to congratulate these awardees for their fine projects and also to thank all the other submitters. Interesting work like this in all of these categories is happening at all of our institutions. I encourage all of you to start thinking now about the nominations that you'll be submitting in the coming fall. Thank you very much. I'll return the podium now to Bernie Riley.
Thank you, Richard. Before I make a call to adjourn, I want to let you know that this webcast will be archived, and that means it'll be available on YouTube. We'll send everyone who registered for the webcast a message saying when it's up and giving you the URL for that. I invite you also to log on again this afternoon at 1 o'clock Chicago time for the CRL Collections Forum. That will be about primary source collections, both digital and print and traditional. Next year, our meeting will be an in-person meeting in Chicago. We will send you the dates. We will post those dates fairly soon. This year, I wanted to thank Fred Heath, our outgoing chair, who has been for the duration of his time on the board, his 6 years on the board, and 2 years as chair, a committed, energetic, and articulate advocate of CRL and all that we do. I will miss having the benefit of his sage advice and counsel as chair of the board. I welcome to the new chair, board chair, Sarah Mahalik, who was, as a treasurer, was so immersed in the details of CRL operations that the board chair role will probably be easy or light duty. That immersion in detail is now being taken up, as Fred said, by Deborah Carver, who has agreed to, and was elected yesterday as treasurer of the board and chair of the Budget and Finance Committee. I wanted to thank you for your support and commitment to CRL. What we've been able to accomplish in 2011, what we are proposing to accomplish in 2012 rely entirely or extremely heavily on you, not only on your financial support, but the participation of yourself, whether it's serving on the CRL board or in the CRL standing committees, and the participation of your staff, particularly in the webinars, the forums, the roundtables, those kinds of things. This continuity that we provide in access to collections and in the survival of collections is really not possible without a community like yourself. So on behalf of the board of Center for Research Library, the staff and management of Center for Research Libraries, I thank you very much. I'll now call for a motion to adjourn.
And that's star one on the phone.
Leslie Weir, University of Ottawa. I'd like to move that we adjourn the annual meeting of 2011.
Do we have a second?
A second.
So moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much, and maybe we hope to see a lot of you this afternoon at 1 o'clock. Thank you.